Hey everybody, this is The Flash, and I am here with...
This is Harley Quinn.
And together we are...
The
Wonder
Twins!
Wonder Twin powers, activate! Shape of an eagle!
Form of water!
Harley, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing awesome, especially when I take the form of water. I sound so intimidating, don't I?
Always, but aren't you always a bucket of water?
Apparently.
Is that like always the transformation?
That was his go-to one, yeah. It was water something. I was looking at a couple of the old episodes, and he even turned into an ice unicycle.
What?
An ice unicycle, and your counterpart turned into an octopus, and she then hopped onto the unicycle and pedaled away.
That is ridiculous. That is so ridiculous.
So ridiculous. Anyway, guys, everybody, welcome to Wonder Twins podcast. This is now episode 5. We are calling ourselves the unofficial Legends of Tomorrow podcast. That's what this episode is going to be about. There isn't really a dedicated podcast to Legends. We know that our big leaders up on Air Squad did a little bit of talking about it, but we thought just for fun, we're going to cover the show and actually dedicate an entire podcast to it. So it's just for fun, and other people that are watching the show want to join us and share their thoughts and ideas. That's what we're hoping for, and that's what we're going to sit and do. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, if anybody else out there listening wants to chime in, I completely understand the feeling when other podcasters say, yeah, it's just the two of us talking. We'd love for some feedback.
Exactly. It's because we're kind of talking to each other, and we always have fun visits with each other, but
yeah,
we're kind of sending these conversations out over the airwaves, and it would be nice to know if people are listening in. And speaking of that, before we even go on, we have had one piece of feedback.
Woo!
We have to say thank you to Jeremy Richards, all the way in Melbourne, Australia. He had posted a comment on one of the Facebook pages, and he had said that he listened to us starting from episode 3 and said that we sounded great. Awesome. We had somebody listen, and he actually told us that he did. So thanks, Jeremy. This is a shout out to you. He also requested that we look into getting onto iTunes, as did Podcast Overlord suggested. So I need to research a little bit about it. There's all kinds of technical mumbo jumbo that I'm still learning about. RSS feeds that iTunes uses and whatever. So I'm going to look into it and see what we can do. For now, if you can please just do your best to join us the way that we have it set up, that would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy. Such nice comments.
Yeah. So now, in order for people to get in touch with us, there is a brand new email. I know I went over all the other specs on our last podcast, Facebook page that they can leave comments on, but we now have an email, and that email is cybercastfan@gmail.com. So that's Cybercast, cybercastfan @gmail.com. So there you go. You guys, we would love to hear from you. Whether it's telling us how we're doing or giving us advice, or what we're hoping with this show is to join us to talk about Legends of Tomorrow with your ideas, your theories, what you thought of the show, what you think of your characters, who's your favorite, who don't you like, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, send us some theories. That's what makes these shows so fun.
Exactly. So what we thought we would do, discussing before the show here, is we're thinking most of the viewers for Legends are coming over from Arrow and Flash. But I also do know that there's quite a few people that watch either Arrow or Flash and don't watch the other, which leads me to think that there could be a lot of people that are just going to be starting with Legends of Tomorrow because they maybe saw advertisements and think it looks like a sci-fi time travel future show or whatever, and they want to check it out, but they don't watch Flash or Arrow. So in thinking about that, we thought we would start off our first unofficial full podcast to go through quickly about each character, what they're about, and where they're from. not spend too much time, but talk about each of them a little bit, just so people have an idea. Because if you watch the pilot episode, it really just kind of started right in the middle of it all, as if you have watched Flash and Arrow and know who all these characters are. So I think any new viewers coming to it is going to be pretty confused.
Yeah, and they also did devote a significant amount of time on both the Arrow and Flash TV shows to setting up these series. So
that's right.
It might be worthwhile to check out some key episodes. Maybe we should come up with a list.
We could put a list together, and maybe I'll make a note about that on the Cybercast page or something. We could do that. Excellent idea. All right, so let's go through the list real quickly. This show starts off with basically the captain. He's the one who gathers this whole team of misfits together, and he goes by the name of Rip Hunter, played by Arthur Darvill, who most people know from Doctor Who. He is basically, the way they describe him, he is a time-traveling superhero from the future who works to ensure the safety of the time stream. And he has other time masters, they call it, that lay down the law and stuff like that. And apparently something that sounds really cool, his headquarters, where he bases all of his operations out of, exists at the end of time. That's kind of cool, a concept.
Yeah, that sounds neat.
So, that is Rip Hunter. And now what the show is based on, because we were talking about this in our last Wonder Twins podcast, they are tasked with hunting down Vandal Savage. And Vandal Savage is a pretty bad dude. He's played by Casper Crump, who I think is just playing the part amazing. The show has taken a little bit of writing liberty with the character. In the DC Wikipedia, he is known to have been a caveman during the prehistoric time period who was exposed to a meteorite that enhanced his physiology. And now he basically is immortal. He lives throughout the ages and has been an influential figure in history, manipulating many of its greatest conflicts, whether you're thinking of World War II with Nazi Germany and all that kind of stuff. He's a master of planning and many forms of combat due to his thousands of years of existence. So the TV show has taken that a little bit and rewrote it where he... maybe you can help me here, Harley?
Sure, yeah. Well, he originated in Egypt, along with Hawkman and Hawkgirl, who we'll get to.
Sure, we'll do them next.
Yeah, so, I mean, instead of being a prehistoric caveman, he's tied into their mythos, and so I think he was actually a priest, and Shi'ar is a high priestess, so that's kind of how they're interconnected, and he's in love with her, and there's this whole big thing. He's jealous because she's in love with another man, and so he kills them both. And then there's this big meteorite that comes through, and they're kind of all bound together. And he absorbs their life force and becomes immortal, and they are reincarnated through time to chase him.
Right, and that's all due because of the way the TV show is doing it. This meteorite expelled some kind of dark matter energy of some kind at the same time that Hawkman and Hawkgirl, or at that time known as Prince Khufu and Shi'ara, that's a tough one to pronounce.
It is.
They were reciting some ancient, I don't know, magical poem or spell of some kind. So combine all of them reciting that saying with the meteorite's dark energy and Savage killing them. It, like you said, it bound all three of them together. Vandal Savage now is immortal. He just lives for thousands and thousands of years, while Hawkman and Hawkgirl continually reincarnate from lifetime to lifetime, and they basically have to find each other and remember everything. It takes them a while for their memories to come back each time they're reincarnated. Mm-hmm. And like you said, Vandal Savage, his sole mission is to continually hunt them down and kill them, because every time he kills them, he steals their life force and allows him to continue living.
Yes.
So I love their story. It's an amazing, tragic love story and love triangle, and it's crazy. It's a really, really neat story to try and follow. Just over the centuries, and I don't know. I like it.
It is a good story. It's a classic star-crossed lovers.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll let you take on. Our next character is Firestorm, who is made up of 2 people. I'll let you tell us about him.
All right, so Firestorm is a combination of Jefferson Jackson currently and Martin Stein. So basically, and they're played by Franz Drame,
Drame, I would guess, yes.
Drame, and Victor Garber, who I absolutely love. I love Victor Garber. But basically, Firestorm is they're a nuclear-powered superhero, and they have the ability to transmute elements. The Firestorm Matrix it's like a composite of multiple people that can bond together. So how it all started was Martin Stein actually bonded with another individual, Ronnie Raymond, and Ronnie Raymond was a star on The Flash. And so we kind of got used to him over a couple seasons, and then he has to save Central City by sacrificing himself. And so he gets sucked into a black hole and is presumably dead. So Dr. Stein needs to find another person to bond with, otherwise he's going to blow up, basically, I think. and so who they find is Jefferson Jackson, and he was a former high school football star. And as far as like history from the comics, there's not a whole lot about him. It's a pretty obscure name, so I think the show's kind of taken a lot of liberties to reinvent this character.
Exactly. Good description. And then we go from Firestorm onto White Canary, Sara Lance. She was first on Arrow as Black Canary, the first Black Canary from the Arrow TV universe. They've also taken some liberty in rewriting the whole Canary. If you know the Black Canary background, they've changed it quite a bit. But anyway, she was the first Black Canary on the TV show Arrow. She actually had died on the show, and her sister then took over the Black Canary mantle, and then decided to try to bring Sara Lance back to life, which she did through this thing called the Lazarus Pit, and that's a whole other story. Just know that it brought her back to life, and once she got her wits and life back together, she decided to move on and kind of refine herself and do good, because she was once working for the League of Assassins. She's a very highly skilled martial artist. So she changed the moniker with the help of her sister. She now goes by White Canary, and she is basically the kick-butt, hand-to-hand combatant of the team.
Yeah.
And then we have Adam Ray Palmer. Go ahead, Harley.
Oh, right. So Ray Palmer / the Atom, he, I think from the comics, is he a physics professor? I don't think in the show he's actually a professor. He's like this techie billionaire guy, but he develops this equipment that shrinks him down to a subatomic level, but he still is able to maintain his regular mass, so he can kind of, shrink and go back to normal size, using his equipment at will. And then he's equipped himself with like a combat suit, and it's the best way to describe it is he's DC's version of Iron Man.
Yep.
So think of the Iron Man suit, and that's very similar to the Atom suit.
Yeah, because he shoots out some type of, I don't know what they are, laser beams or photon blasts or something, but yeah exactly. It's very similar to Iron Man. Everybody knows about Iron Man these days because of the movies, so very similar to that. But and now we come to the two guys that don't really fit or belong on the team, and they're kind of supplying all the a lot of the comedy elements. But it's Captain Cold and Heatwave, played by Wentworth Miller and Dominic Purcell, who a lot of people will know from Prison Break because they played brothers on that. So it's kind of fun to have them together. They both came over from Flash TV show, and they have a huge history with the Flash. Captain Cold is the leader of the Rogues, and Heatwave is also one of the Rogues. They're part of Flash's group of enemies. Captain Cold basically has a cold gun that can fire a ray of cold that slows things down on a molecular level. So intensive ice blasts that can stop anyone in their tracks. Well, the Flash runs fast, so that's kind of a handy weapon to have. Whereas the Heatwave himself is a pyromaniac villain who has the opposite of Captain Cold. He has a a flame-throwing gun, basically, and this thing produces intense amount of heat and fire. The two of them together are a pretty deadly duo. They're only concerned, though, with stealing money and jewels and whatever they can for wealth and gain. They're not interested in much else, not being heroes, not helping people out, anything. They just want to make money. They're in it for that. So it's kind of interesting to have them on this team. I think we're going to see them. We're going to see sides to these so-called villains to show that they're maybe not as bad as we think.
They're going to have to do something.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the rundown of the characters we have on the show for everybody that wasn't quite sure who was who and where they came from and stuff. Before we move on to the episode, there's a couple little tidbits of news which I thought was kind of exciting, kind of interesting. Harley, my friend, it was reported and released that Stephen Amell from Arrow is actually going to be on Legends. Not how we saw him in the pilot. He is going to be in a future version of himself when they actually time travel to whatever year. I don't know what year it is, but he's going to be a much older version of himself, along with the very trademark blonde goatee that he is known to have in the comics. And there was also reports that his son, going by the name of Connor Hawke, will also be there.
Great. So the son lives. Except, didn't they name him as William on the Arrow show?
Well, yeah, we were talking about that. I'm pretty sure it was William. That seems familiar sounding. So that's part of the story. I guess that's part of the mystery. Connor Hawke, does he change his name to hide his identity? Is he upset when he finds out he's Oliver Queen's son and doesn't want anything to do with him, so he changes his name? Who knows? But
it's a different son, because then my grave theory would still hold.
So maybe Arrow had two sons, eh?
I don't know. I'm pulling.
So that's just a tiny bit of news. Oh, and then also Ra's al Ghul is supposed to make an appearance onto Legends, and not the current Ra's played by John Barrowman, who is Malcolm Merlyn. Apparently it's supposed to be the first Ra's al Ghul that we saw.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, which kind of makes sense because he's lived for a couple hundred years himself.
That's true.
So if they go back in time, they may run into him. Interesting.
Sounds like it.
Okay, Harley, so one of the first things that I want to discuss about Legends of Tomorrow is the overall feel of the show. Because there's been 2 episodes so far, and apparently it was pilot part 1 and pilot part 2.
Right.
And we both kind of agreed that the pilot number 1, it was decent, it was good, but like any pilot of any show, it didn't quite take off. It didn't quite grab you right away. There's definitely some things we needed to wait for.
Yeah, it definitely felt more setup, like, for sure.
Yeah, and the fact that it started so fast, and if you don't know the story, the background to everything, it would have been very confusing.
True.
So one of the points I want to draw on is how we feel about. It's an hour-long show, which gets cut down to roughly 43 minutes due to commercial breaks. Mm-hmm. So you've got 43 minutes to fit in a story that includes 8 characters. That's a lot.
Is a tall order.
That's a lot of people to try and get screen time for. And what I have found so far in both episodes is that they are trying to give everybody a little bit of time. So it's jumping around pretty quick. We're not getting a lot of focus on any individual character, although I would say Hawkman and Hawkgirl probably get a little bit more story parts than anybody else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then this episode was very centric on Martin Stein.
Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to bring it up for, because I'm thinking instead of every single episode trying to fit everybody in where everybody has equal time and an equal part of the story, I think what would make this show really take off and really grab people where we are invested in these characters and we start to pick our favorites and that kind of thing, is where each episode kind of centers on 1 or 2 of the characters, so we get to learn a little bit more about them and deal with a crisis for them or whatever's happening in each episode, and then all the other characters are just kind of there as backup and helping them out. And so from episode to episode, whereas this episode 2 was kind of Martin Stein centric, maybe next week we can focus more on Captain Cold and Heatwave, and then the week after that a little bit more on White Canary, and that, I think that way it would allow us to attach to the characters a lot more strongly.
Yeah, and it would allow them to tell more of the story without it feeling so disjointed. Because if you're trying to fit all that into every episode for every character, you can't.
You can't.
So, yeah. I mean, I guess if you think about it, the first part of the pilot was focused more on Rip Hunter, and kind of, he was the only character we had not really been introduced to if you'd been watching Arrow and The Flash. We know all of the other characters.
Right.
So that, I guess, episode 1 you could consider Rip Hunter's episode. Episode 2 you can consider Martin Stein's episode.
Yeah, I mean, and a little, I agree with you, Rip got a little bit more of the time, but I think the main reason why episode 1 was not fantastically amazing was because it was all over the place and trying to fit everything in. So, but it definitely, episode 2, a huge improvement. I mean, that right off the bat, like you were saying, it grabbed you within the first 10 minutes, and this is fun, this is awesome, we're we're going to be in for a treat here with this, and I can see that happening as the show goes on. They've got so much happening that it's going to take a while for it to develop, because it basically, it's like an explosion. Boom! Here's a show with 8 characters, now try to follow all the pieces.
I know, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
It'll be interesting to see how they continue to...
Yeah. And you can see it even, like, it's to its credit, but it also deters from it a little bit. The fight sequences, and especially in this episode, the fight sequences I found almost confusing, because there was so much happening, so much going on, where the camera had to maneuver and fly all over the place to catch up with each character in each of their individual fight scenarios and see what's happening with them. So we never actually got to see a lot of time on any individual character. It just seemed to move so quickly, and you had to really, not blink and focus hard, or you're going to miss something.
I know, yeah. There's a lot going on. I mean, you got a couple showcases here and there, like with
White Canary, especially, I think.
Yeah, White Canary. Yeah, they focus more on her, and then they also focus a little bit on Firestorm with the nuclear explosion. Oh yeah,
that was a point you wanted to talk about too. We had forgotten about that.
You mean we might forget about it in the future? Edit.
Well, I know you had actually asked me, now that we're on that point, you had actually asked me, wait, Firestorm can absorb a nuclear blast? How does that work?
Yeah.
Well, if it's because he is known as the Nuclear Man. That's kind of his nickname, the Nuclear Man. So a nuclear blast, I guess that's part of his superpowers. He absorbed, because it looked like, after he absorbed it, it looked like it gave him a burst of power, and he felt this strength and this, woo, that was good, and off he went to get back in the fight.
Yeah, it definitely looked like it did something.
So
I don't know if it supercharged him, or if it was just a lot to take in all at once, or yes.
I think that's basically all it came down to. It supercharged him. He absorbed it. I mean, he's the Nuclear Man, and he absorbed the nuclear blast. Although it still left a pretty big hole in the ground there, which I wonder if that's going to come back somehow. Like, all of a sudden Norway's got a massive hole in the ground. Where did that come from?
Well, hopefully it looked like it was on a relatively remote island, so no one should discover it.
Exactly. But still, it was still pretty neat to see. I mean, he absorbed it, obviously, made him a little stronger, and away he went. So that was still pretty neat to see. So I guess actually, now that you mentioned it, each character did get a few seconds of time to show their abilities. We saw White Canary fighting. We saw Firestorm absorb it. We saw Adam ripping around when he was miniaturized and beating people up with his blasts and punching them. So that was kind of fun. And we saw Heatwave and Captain Cold blasting their guns like crazy. So I guess amidst the frenetic action, there was moments of individual fight scenarios. So
there was a few moments in there.
But see, what I mean is that we have to. It's after the fact that we have to think back and realize what we saw during the viewing. You couldn't pick up on that because things were happening so fast.
Yeah, I agree. It's just not disjointed, but there's just a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. So that I think that's the challenge for the writers and the director, definitely, to try to handle having 8 characters on the show. Well, now down to 7. Maybe that's one way they're going to handle it. But how do you fit so much in and still make it engaging and interesting and a story worth following?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So with the episode, we're actually last week's episode we were talking about Gideon. This to me is probably the biggest mystery. For me, it's the biggest mystery that I want to find out. I'm the most intrigued with and most curious about is they had Gideon on here, and it wasn't the same sounding Gideon that is on the Flash, but everything looked the same. It was the same computer, and we debated this quite a bit. Yes. It is the most interesting thing to me that I would like to find out, and we were wondering about the newspaper, that future newspaper that we've seen on the Flash. We couldn't remember what the date was, and I looked at it. It was actually the year 2025.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of places us when Flash disappears. And we were wondering when was Gideon built? When was? And these are the questions I want to pose. If we are having listeners, and I would love to get some feedback, what your theories and thoughts are about Gideon. That'll be our first topic that we would love to hear back from people on. What we're curious about is, did Flash run into the future and create Gideon and then brought her back to his timeline, or did he get help making her in the future, or is she from the year 2020-ish roughly herself? Like, when was the technology? What are your ideas? What do you think?
I've debated this a lot, but I mean the timelines get screwy because, I mean, we know that Flash had to go into the future.
It's now been known that he did time travel quite a bit himself. I actually looked that up. He traveled into the future quite a few times, and he actually stayed there. I think he was there for like 3 years. I don't remember what year he went to, but he was there for like 3 years. But because he can time travel, he came back and didn't miss a beat.
Right. That's interesting. So he go at some point. We know he creates her. We just don't know the when. We know that when Reverse Flash, going into Flash again, when he comes back from like 400 years in the future, he has Gideon as his own.
Yeah.
But she responds to Barry.
Yeah.
And that's how we find out that, Barry Allen's the one who created her. Mm-hmm. But then now we have this British version of Gideon.
The British Gideon, yeah.
From who knows when, because Rip Hunter could be from, technically he's from 2166 currently, but he could be from any time. Yeah. And who knows when he picked up the technology, or from where.
Right.
But I'm curious as to why it's a different version.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about last time too. Is there multiple versions? Everybody has their own Gideon, like everybody has their own laptop or PC computer. Like what? It's just intriguing. I want to know this connection with Gideon. Why is she with Rip Hunter when we know her to have come from the Flash? It's
probably the most minor plot point of any of the TV shows, and we're hung up on it.
We're hung up on it. So, anybody out there, please, this is what we want to know. What our first question for you is: where is Gideon from? Why is she here? And why does it sound differently? What do you guys think on that one? So now, in the opening part of this episode, what was it? 1975 Norway that they went to?
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a big arms, weapons, and mass destruction there. They were being auctioned off to a whole bunch of nefarious bad guys, and that's where they thought Vandal Savage was going to be. So they thought they'd go there and catch up to him there and try to catch him. And who do we see walk by in the background? Damien Dark.
I immediately paused.
Arrow, yeah. What is he doing there? Why is he there? What's the connection? we know from Arrow that he also seems to suck the life force out of people and lives for a long time. So all we saw is that he was there. They were selling a nuclear warhead, and he was the first bidder. For $105 million, he bid for the nuclear warhead. And then our group of misfit heroes were recognized, or not recognized, but recognized as not belonging there. And Damien Dark actually walks up to them and tells them that he knows everybody and doesn't recognize their quote-unquote organization. And that became very intriguing.
Yeah. He's a fascinating character. He intrigues me just because he does seem to have his hands in everything and be at the center of everything.
So that's the big mystery, is what is he doing there other than he was buying weapons, and he acknowledged that our team doesn't belong. So
do you think that was just a fun Easter egg for Arrow watchers?
Unless they're going to connect it all together down the road and we're going to have crossover events like crazy.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe the Legends team comes back to the normal timeline and they help Arrow out with something because they learned something about Damien Dark in the past. Or it's absolutely nothing. It was just a fun little thing to have him on there, and we'll never see it again. Who knows?
I know. Who knows?
Huh. So moving on, we could talk about Martin Stein, because there was some awesome fun points with him in this episode.
Oh yeah, he's great.
I know you had quite a few things that you liked about him, so why don't you take that away?
Oh yeah, no, I loved what his character was doing, just kind of like the way that he talks them into the auction. He's very tough, he's very confident, he just like asserts himself. It's almost like he kind of like comes up out of nowhere and he's like, do you know who I am? You should let us in immediately. I am blah 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 blah. Like lists off all this stuff. And I was like, that's fantastic. And then, he's, feeling pretty good about himself and all like high and mighty. And then he, in one small slip up, just sort of gives them all away by, saying, well, not in this era, or something like that. He's talking about fissionable material.
Yeah, it was something about it, like you're saying, he was very confident to get them through the door and held that confidence up until he let it slip when he said something about nuclear power in this era.
Mm-hmm. There's this arrogance coming through.
Yeah,
He's
and
smarter than everybody.
Immediately, Vandal Savage, you've seen the facial expression. He immediately recognized the slip up, and that blew their cover completely, and there was no getting it back after that.
No, there's definitely not.
No.
But yeah, I liked how they continued to kind of like have him see that about himself, like see his own arrogance and just kind of like see his own personality by viewing it through his younger self. So it was almost kind of like a fascinating case study. Like if you could put yourself 50 years in the future and then go back and visit yourself in your early 20s, would you still be the same person? And what would you learn about yourself? And how much similarities would there be? And it's very interesting experience.
And they found the right actor to play a younger version of himself. You could definitely see the resemblance, and he played him well. He played a younger, arrogant version of himself very well. And then
yeah, it was good casting.
Yeah, but I mean, Victor Garber he's priceless as always, and he just acknowledging his own arrogance and being, what I thought was funny was that he was getting annoyed with himself.
Right, exactly.
And, getting frustrated with himself, and that was pretty funny to watch for sure.
Oh, I know. Oh, and just that one scene where he's like, well, maybe you should smoke a little bit less, or maybe you should cut back on the sodium or trans fats or something.
Trans fats.
He was eating potato chips.
Yeah, he was like trying to give himself some tips to be a healthier person for later. So
this guy is just like looking at himself like, what? This guy's crazy.
That was pretty funny. We'll come back to him in a little bit, because there's some timeline stuff we wanted to talk about, but we'll save that for near the end there.
Yeah.
Talking about Ray, though, Adam, there's a part in this episode that kind of bugged us both a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He lost a part of his suit during the big fight. Now, you were saying that you understand why that had to happen, because we had to reiterate the idea of them
like not leaving something behind that could give them away, but they they took it one step further, so I can understand why it was needed. It still felt forced to me, but I can understand why it was needed to reiterate the fact that if they leave future technology in the past, and then smart enough people can eventually reverse engineer it or re-engineer it, and then they have, technology from 100, not 100 years in the future, but 50, 40, 30 years in the future, or something like that. I mean, that's a huge difference if you think about where we were in terms of technology in 1975, and then a piece of a supersuit just like falls off, and inside the supersuit contains these blasters that are like minuscule.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge jump in technology. Astronomical jump in technology.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so.
Well, and what I found odd about it is that how easily it broke off too. You would think with Ray Palmer's smarts, his engineering, and all the intelligence that he has, that he would have built the suit to be a little bit more durable. Then, because he was just in a fist fight with a regular thug, nobody even with any abilities or anything, and it was just that the thug hit it. I don't know, it looked like a broomstick or something he swung at him, and knocked this piece of the suit off. And okay, that to me seems a little bit odd that it would be that easy. The suit should be more durable and definitely built to withstand combat, if that's definitely what he was designing it for, was to be able to fight. So a little bit of and that's part of the show being it's brand new, and there's going to be some hiccups and some things that they got to figure out and learn, but that's also a writer's thing too. They have to, exactly like you said, well, we've got to emphasize that they shouldn't leave anything behind to let people know that they're from the future, and of course that you can't learn that lesson unless you learn it the hard way. So what do we have? How do we do that? Let's knock a piece of his supersuit off from the future, and there you go.
Leave technology behind. Perfect.
Yeah. So, well, I guess from that, maybe we should just jump into our tidbit about time, because there was, and you worded it perfectly. There was many butterflies that they stepped on. Talking about the butterfly effect, if everybody has heard about the butterfly effect. They stepped on many butterflies that they had to go back and try to correct. And we've got a few examples that we made some points of right off the bat, like you saw the wedding ring on Martin Stein's finger start to disappear, which reminded you of Back to the Future. Exactly that. Exactly. So things that they are doing right there in the past is already affecting the future.
Mm-hmm.
And one being exactly what we just finished talking about, Ray's suit, which led to Vandal Savage getting superpowered tech, which when they Gideon showed their possible future, that tech piece in Vandal Savage's hands leads to him destroying Central City back in current times. Yeah. So
that was the point that they were trying to make. It's like, if you leave future technology here, or if you expose too much who you are, then that could completely change the timeline, especially if you leave technology, because now apparently Vandal Savage can destroy Central City in 2016.
Exactly. All because of that one piece.
Yeah. So, it's a definite huge ripple throughout time that all hinges on him getting his hands on that technology.
Now imagine how difficult that is going to be. You've got a team of 8 people all scrambling around in the past, and none of them can step on any butterflies. Like that.
It's
virtually going to be impossible. Things are going to happen. Things are going to change, and we've already got enough timeline jumping back and forth, time travel things happening. So it's going to be very tricky to keep track of for you and me, especially when we want to talk about it.
Yeah, and they're gonna have to be careful what they quote unquote change in 2016 because they have two other shows in this universe
That it could affect, exactly.
that
And
it'll affect.
there's also some viewers that are going to be 10 times smarter than us, and they're going to be picking up on all this time travel stuff and being able to keep track of it. So it's a heavy load to be carrying for the writers of this show, for
It
sure.
is, and that's usually my MO. I'm usually the nitpicky time travel person.
All right, then that you have now been tasked with keeping track of that.
Oh, shoot. Shouldn't have said a thing.
You just passed the job interview.
Ooh.
So now another point, Clarissa, which is Martin Stein's wife in our time, he hasn't met her yet, and in this episode we find out that he was supposed to be going to a party, some party on the university campus where he meets her for the first time.
Right.
Now, with everything that was going on, it ends up that he misses meeting her, or he was going to be late meeting her, so already we saw the ring disappear, and that already led us to the fact that he, for some reason, missed out on meeting her. So yet something else they have to fix.
Yeah, and that comes back into play a little bit later.
Exactly.
When we figure out why the younger Stein has missed this meeting.
Yes. All right, so we'll come back on that one. Another point, which I thought was a huge one, was the first big fight scene during the all the weapons purchasing. Vandal Savage is up there on stage, and all of our heroes come flying in, swooping in, and you've got two characters with wings on their back. You've got a guy in a super suit, and
cold guns,
heat guns, martial arts extreme. They're all fighting in front of him, not only revealing, that they have superpowers and super tech. It also shows that they're not really from that timeline. They're not from around there. What's going on? That's a huge reveal to somebody like Vandal Savage. He is not stupid. He's going to obviously pick up on that right away, that, hey, something is not right here.
Yeah.
And once you reveal that to him, there is no fixing that. There's no going back from that. So that was I don't think they stepped on a butterfly. I think they stepped on a pterodactyl. That thing was...
Yeah, they definitely did. Well, Vandal Savage, he had some interesting lines too, where he said he was walking down the hallway and he was speaking with one of his lackeys, and he basically was like, yeah, they're not. Let's just say they're not from around here, and he's like, what, you mean like they're from the future? But that's impossible. And then Vandal Savage is like, yeah, like immortality is impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Totally.
It was just a very funny exchange.
Yeah. So the point that we alluded to, why would the younger Martin Stein be missing meeting his wife? That's because after they knocked him out at first, after he woke up from being knocked out, that deterred him from his original course of going to the party. He now chased after them to their invisible spaceship, their invisible time-traveling spaceship, and walked right into it, right behind them.
How do you explain that?
How do you explain that? Not only are you talking to your future self, you are now on board an invisible spaceship. And that should have massive repercussions or ramifications for the future. I think it's a huge point, because how does that not affect the current Martin Stein, the older version of him? How does that not immediately affect his whole life and everything he's gone through? Does he not just get whammied with a whole bunch of new information? Does it not alter where he would have gone in his life, knowing what is out there? What were you were saying something to me before the show to kind of deter me from that line of thinking.
I was, but this is just another question of how are they handling time travel, because there are many different ways to do it. Have you seen the movie Looper?
Yes. Loved it.
Okay. Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen Looper, and if you haven't, turn this off right now and go listen to it and go watch it, because it's an amazing movie. But what you're talking about is basically the Looper effect, where when he changes something in his past, it immediately affects his future self. But
You
the
would
wedding,
think.
yeah, you would think. But the wedding band disappearing, that's more like Back to the Future, where it's like sort of affecting Marty at that time, but it's like kind of taking time to happen. It's not like an immediate thing. It's not an immediate effect. Like the wedding band disappears, but it's not set in stone that he hasn't, he's missed his chance to meet his wife or whatever.
Okay.
So how I was trying to reconcile the differences between the two is that it's kind of like the whole Reverse Flash, again, to bring in another Flash reference. I'm sorry if anybody is not watching The Flash. But so the Reverse Flash / Martin Stein are in their current timeline. They're in the quote-unquote future, and they come back to the past. So now that they're in the past, they're meeting with other people, and the perceptions around them are being changed, but that's almost like they're part of a different timeline. So like Martin Stein's timeline is not necessarily going to change his thoughts because that didn't happen to that Martin Stein who's come back to the past. But this Martin Stein, he has a new origin, kind of like the Reverse Flash has a new origin. That's kind of where I was going with that whole like time remnant. It's the same timeline, but this part is still set in stone because it's already happened in your timeline and you can't change that part.
I gotcha.
But you know what I mean? But at the same time, there's something different happening. It's a new origin for the younger version of yourself.
Okay.
I don't know if that holds true because it's not like Reverse Flash is confronting himself. He's confronting other people.
Right.
So, but it didn't seem like Martin Stein was getting bombarded with brand new memories, like, the Looper effect. So.
Yeah, no, exactly. It looked like nothing had changed for him, so
right.
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Unless, like you were saying, it's a slower effect. Maybe eventually over the next couple episodes we'll start seeing him changing.
True. You could.
Because knowledge is coming to him, but...
The wedding band came back, so because he met Clarissa.
Yes. Well, we saw him catch up to her eventually, and
yeah.
they had their first kiss or something on the steps there, I thought we saw.
Well, maybe he's so enamored that visions of space travel and time travel just flew out of his head.
Or the knock on the head, he thought he was hallucinating, who knows?
Who knows, yeah. Or he's going to get some random memories in the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to something that we both were kind of shocked by is Hawkman going down.
I know.
They finally caught up to Vandal Savage, and he loses the fight.
I can't believe they killed him.
I can't believe that either, because I was just buying... Well, I wasn't just, but I was really buying into their story together of, he always remembers his love for her, but in this incarnation, she didn't remember that. And she wasn't
willing to.
No, and she wasn't willing to. She didn't want to be forced into loving him when she wasn't feeling it or anything like that. And so it was a heartbreaking, tragic kind of story. And then they go and kill him off.
Yeah.
And
I kept expecting them to carry him back to the ship I thought they were going to until you see the life force go to Vandal Savage, and I was like, oh, okay, he's dead.
He's dead, yeah, because he thought there was a chance to save him possibly, but yeah, no, they. Which, I mean, when I was looking at it, I remember he was a very late addition to the cast. They announced him very late that Hawkman will be included. So maybe the original plan all along was that he wasn't going to be a full-time cast member. With them killing him in 2 episodes already, maybe they'll have plans for him to come back if the team visits past and they run into him back there, or if they go to the future, maybe they run into a future reincarnation of him. I'm not sure. He seemed a pretty established character right off the bat. It seemed like a good solid foundation with him, so it was surprising.
It was very surprising.
And then
it was not.
For me, because it was only the second episode, we hadn't really had much emotion on the show yet. It's been fast, furious action and jokes left and right, but we had this love story between the two of them, and then all of a sudden once he dies, Kendra / Shiara / Hot Girl. We'll have to figure out what we want to call her. We could maybe go by Kendra because that's her current name. Anyway, she suddenly has full effect that the last time, because they were hypnotizing her or putting her into some type of trance state throughout the episode, and she was trying to remember her past life, her original first life from Egypt, so they could remember some details. And in her very last trip back to the past, in doing that, she remembered her feelings for him, and they had come back, and then he dies, and we see her, and she gets injured. She gets almost mortally wounded with the knife stab to the side there. And while they are fixing her and healing her, she has all these memories and feelings come back to her, and she realizes that he's dead, and she is just having this emotional outburst that she never got to tell him that she remembered how she felt. And assumingly tell him that she loves him and all of that. And wow, that was just a out of nowhere tug on the heartstrings kind of moment. And
it's very sad.
It was very sad. Wow. And it makes me wonder what they're going to do with that, because now she's alone, feeling all of this for him, and he's gone.
I know. I don't know how I feel about that, especially because they had that quote earlier in the episode where he was like, well, don't you understand destiny? And she's like, well, it's the part that I don't get to think, or the part of me not thinking, or something like that bothers me. And I was like, okay, I could totally respect that, but at the same time, we know that eventually the two of them come together. So I wasn't, especially once you could see that she was getting those feelings back, and then they kill him off. I was just not expecting that.
No, and that's, and then I thought after that, this show actually has already pulled a few shocking moments, like we talked last week, the Vandal Savage killing the mother and child right off the bat. So I think this show is going to be throwing us left hooks out of nowhere quite often.
And I like that because it keeps everything fresh and you don't quite know what to expect, and I like that it's bold, but at the same time I was like, wow, okay, well, there goes a cast member.
Just they have 8, so maybe they need to thin it out a bit. I don't know,
I guess, but are they really going to kill Captain Cold? They're not going to kill Ray Palmer. Are they going to kill Sarah Lance for the second time? I
guess if you have expendable characters, it's Hawkman and Hawkgirl, because they just get reincarnated anyway.
Exactly.
So if you're going to kill anyone, just keep killing them. But it's going to get to a point, they can only do it once or twice, otherwise we're not going to care anymore when they do die.
I know, it's going to get ridiculous.
Yeah, so.
Although I just thought of a question. Did they recover the knife? With the poem on it?
Vandal Savage took it, because he took it off of them in the fight, and then that's what he stabbed them both with.
Right. Okay, so he does have it still.
As far as I can tell, he's got the knife.
Okay.
Which is what they need to kill him with.
Right. And she has to do it. That was the key piece of information we were missing. That
was the big twist, exactly, because we saw, Hawkman Carter he actually was winning the fight, and he stabbed that thing right into Savage's chest and buried it deep, and nothing happened.
I was like, what? Why is he not dying?
And then we found out it's because Hawkgirl has to do it.
Yep. That was a twist I did not see coming.
That was a twist.
That and his death.
And that is
I guess that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to. We didn't even quite get a chance to see how all the other characters reacted to it, did we? Because they all they saved Hawkgirl, and then they realized they had to get out of there, and they flew off in the ship. But did we really see them?
They had their powwow, and they all decided that they were going to stay together and chase Vandal Savage throughout time. For Carter. The only person who really gave any sort of speech was actually Captain Cold.
Yeah, you're right.
I thought was interesting. He's he kind of kind of put it in a good way. He's like, well, I didn't know him from Adam, but he was a part of my crew, so we're going to avenge him.
Which made us all suddenly love him or hate him. You kind of attached to Captain Cold. You're like, damn, that was pretty cool of him to say.
Mm-hmm.
He's standing up for them. What's
I
that?
I said I love him as a villain.
Oh, he just talks. It's the way he talks.
I know, he's so funny.
Smooth criminal.
He's just deadpan, and he always has these one-liners, especially when he's on the Flash. Oh, he kills me. He's so funny.
and like we said about Heatwave before, he's just the big dumb oaf kind of thing, but he's pretty funny actually, and
he's grown on me this episode. I liked him.
Yeah, oh totally. Both of them did, and you can see that there's a side to them that is not all evil. They're only out to make money. That's all they care about. But they're not Vandal Savage, Damien Dark type of bad guy.
No, they're not.
So.
They're kind of in between.
All right, Harley, I think that about wraps it up for our first full coverage of the unofficial Legends of Tomorrow podcast.
I think that does it.
We would love it if anybody watching the show would come join us on here and help us figure this mess out, because there's so much time jumping back and forth, futures and pasts, and how it's going to affect the characters and the timelines and all that. It's a lot for us to take on, so definitely, guys, if we've missed something and you want to point it out, come let us know. Or if you just want to throw us theories and ideas, or even expand on things that we said, come talk to us.
We'd love to have you.
Definitely. All right, Harley. Well, this was fun. We are going to plan to do this every week. The show airs on Thursday night, so we were talking about recording every Friday night. That gives everybody a chance to watch the show and dive into their thoughts and stuff like that. So we will hopefully do this every Friday.
Yeah, and we get started decently late, so you have a little bit of time after work to get your theories submitted.
Exactly. Yeah, we have no due dates or anything yet for for submission times. We just want to hear from you to start with, and
exactly,
definitely help us out here, and let's talk about Legends of Tomorrow.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, this is the Flash signing off of Legends of Tomorrow.
And this is Harley Quinn. I'm out.